Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for December 12th, 2023. Today I'm going to be taking a look at two events that are scheduled to occur today, which could mark the beginning of a turning point in the situation of the two major wars that are afflicting the globe. First, you have a UN General Assembly session, which will take up a resolution for a ceasefire. It has 102 sponsors. Remember, just last week, the UN Security Council voted 13-1 with one abstention for a ceasefire, with the veto coming from the United States and the abstention from the United Kingdom, the two governments dominated by war hawks and neocons. Today, it's hard to know what's going to happen. The resolution has, as I said, actually 103 sponsors. It's occurring as there's an unmistakable ethnic cleansing going on in Palestine. You can deny it all you want, but 90% of the population has been displaced. And the parts that are being evacuated are being destroyed. Homes are being destroyed. Neighborhoods are being destroyed. There's no way for people to return. Now, the Israeli officials deny the claims of ethnic cleansing. A spokesman for the defense ministry said there is not, never was, and never will be an Israeli plan to move the residents of Gaza to Egypt. Well, as the Greater Israel fanatics often like to say, look at the facts on the ground. With 90% displaced, where are they going to go? Everywhere they go, they're met with new bombings. There's no safe zone. There are documents that show that the Israeli intelligence ministry has proposed the permanent and forceful transfer of Gaza's Palestinian population into Egypt. That was not a policy document, it was a recommendation. And you have a leading Israeli think tank which published a paper saying that the wartime cabinet could use this war to exploit the, quote, unique and rare opportunity to evacuate the whole Gaza Strip. Now, in the meantime, the U.S. is continuing its double talk about humanitarian policy. The principal spokesman for this double talk is Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, who told CNN, "I think the intent is there to ensure civilian safety," following his talks with Israeli officials. But then he said, "The results are not always manifesting themselves." You mean that the murder of civilians casts doubt on the pledges of acting with the safety of the Palestinians in mind? Well, that's why we say it's double talk. Now, the problem is the U.S. is complicit completely in this policy. And when we talk about complicity, we talk quite a bit about the military-industrial complex, the broader military-industrial complex, which is not just defense contractors, but includes corporate cartels, banks, oil companies, and so on. But a very useful list was provided by the Center on Corporate Accountability of the American Friends Service Committee. Accountability is a good word, but it's hardly ever applied. But they have a report on war profiteers and who is benefiting from the contractings of the war underway now in Gaza. Who would benefit from the 14+ billion that's scheduled to be voted on in the Congress? Besides the UN Security or UN General Assembly meeting today, Zelensky is going to be appearing before the Congress to push for more funds for Ukraine, and this is tied to a bill that has more funds for Israel, another 60+ billion between Ukraine and Israel. So the AFSC has put out this report as part of its Forum on the Arms Trade. And it said that Israel could not sustain the attacks without the continued flow of weapons from the United States. And the American Friends Service Committee supports a full suspension of all arms transfers to both Israeli and Palestinian militant groups. Now, the list, and this is a not complete list, but some of the companies they report on BAE Systems, the infamous British manufacturer of weapons, that has been used. Well, they produce the M109 self-propelled 155 millimeter howitzer, which the Israeli military has been using to pulverize Gaza. Boeing, which produces the Apache attack helicopter and the F-15 fighter jets, which are being used by the Israelis. Caterpillar, which could be producing tractors as part of the Oasis plan, of the water plan to benefit both Palestine and Israel. Instead, they're building heavy equipment, the D9 bulldozer, which is used to plow under houses and rubble, including rubble which has children under it. Lockheed Martin is involved in this. RTX, which was formerly Raytheon, whose former board member is none other than Lloyd Austin, who is the current U.S. Defense Secretary. Now, as I said, this is a partial list, and the Executive Intelligence Review is going to be doing an analysis of the broader funding, how much money is going into this from the $113 billion already spent, and the new money that Biden is asking for, that Zelensky will be appearing before the Congress to beg for. So we'll have that, and when we get that report, we'll post a link to it. Now, there are some in the Senate, and in fact, this is why Zelensky is coming. There are many in the Senate who are opposed to the blank check for Israel and Ukraine. On Ukraine, Senator Vance of Ohio and Tuberville of Alabama drafted an op-ed which attacked the Biden administration for saying that the passage of the supplemental budget is good for the U.S. economy. That is, the $61 billion in new arms expenditures is a good investment because it means American jobs. They write that this is nonsense, and they say you don't start wars to help the economy. Well, in fact, that's exactly what the U.S. has been doing. Now, if you want to help the economy, look at what the BRICS are doing. Look at the Belt and Road Initiative. And just briefly, let me say there's a conference ongoing today between the Saudi Investment Fund and China, talking about new Belt and Road initiatives. The Saudis have just put together a new fund for economic development. Putin was just in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, where they're talking about this plan of the Global South for reconstruction and building modern infrastructure, as opposed to destroying cities. So we'll see what comes from these Belt and Road initiatives, but clearly there's two different worldviews here. One, the world of war and imperial policy and enforcement of geopolitical divide and conquer tactics. The other is economic development. Which should America support? Well, Zelensky is appearing in Washington as the best ally of the military-industrial complex. He's claiming that Ukraine's fight, and they need the weapons, to fight for democracy and freedom. Well, the congressman should ask him, where's the democracy and freedom for those Ukrainians swept off the streets and sent to the front to fight? Where's the democracy and freedom in the canceled elections, in the shutdown of political parties and opposition media, the arrests and assassination of opposition politicians? Well, those are questions that should be asked when he appears today, hat in hand, telling the American public that Ukraine is using the money well by weakening Russia. Meanwhile, Biden is embracing Zelensky, demanding more money for him and for the military-industrial complex, embracing Zelensky, whose policies are more akin to a dictatorship, while Biden is denouncing Trump as a would-be dictator. Again, consistency is not a feature of most U.S. policy today. Under Biden, the United States has lost credibility internationally. It's no longer seen as a force for good and justice. The credibility is in shreds. But the world is moving on, with or without the United States. So the problem is not with the image of the United States. It's what, under Biden, the United States is doing, the evil policies that it's supporting. And as long as the U.S. is supporting wars and destruction, and the economic and political policies of depopulation, including the green policy, including the IMF policy for the developing sector, the new colonial policy, as long as the U.S. is on that side, then the U.S. will continue to lose credibility. So join with us, not just because we need to restore the credibility of the United States, but we need to stop these genocidal wars. We need to stop these policies that are responsible for deaths of innocent civilians, responsible for the destruction of nations. The legacy of Biden is clearly going to be a disaster, as will be the legacy of Netanyahu. The question is, can we rescue the world from the evil deeds that are being perpetrated by these two and their backers and supporters? So thanks for joining me today. We'll be back again tomorrow.